Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Before we get started, I want to hold a moment of silence for Miss Jeanette Culpepper. Ms. Culpepper was a strong advocate against gun violence. After losing her son, she turned her pain into action. While we mourn her passing, it's in her spirit that we continue to do this work. So if we could have a moment of silence for Ms. Culpepper. Thank you. I want to thank everyone here today, especially our partners here at the Department of Justice who've joined us via Zoom. And want to thank Cornelia Sigworth, our Associate Deputy Director at the U.S. Department of Justice, for taking time out of your day to join us virtually here today. So everybody wave to the camera. There we go. And last but not least, I want to introduce my good friend and brother in this work, Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas, who so graciously came here yesterday to root on the Blues, and he brought us bad luck and broke our winning streak. I'm blaming it solely on you.
You should.
Because that's what happens when a Kansas City person puts on a St. Louis jersey.
Right. It's just not right. Ain't right.
But in all seriousness, regional collaboration is really important to me. And I believe that by cooperating and sharing, we can solve problems that both of us face on our respective sides of the state. Gun violence is an issue that touches families across our state. A couple months ago, I spoke about how I lost my cousin to gun violence, who was just 27 years old. And I worry about my son, who has faced dangerous situations himself a couple times in our own neighborhood. Our state's lax gun laws are directly responsible for the spike in violence that we've seen. And cities like Kansas City and St. Louis are prohibited from making our own common sense gun laws on the local level. So we have to look at all the tools in the toolbox to prevent violent crime. We need to address it at the root cause, because the root causes are what create conditions for crime. As I like to say, we can't incarcerate our way to safer neighborhoods. We can't police our way out of poverty. And we know the communities with the most resources see the least crime. So in our search for a new police chief, I've outlined my public safety principles, using smart on crime strategies to ensure that we can prevent crime and address it quickly when it occurs. Only 4% of law enforcement time is spent responding to violent crime. Programs like our Cops and Clinicians program, which Mayor Lucas saw in action last night, ensures that behavioral health specialists respond to appropriate calls so our officers can focus on their main job, solving violent crime. To date, our program has handled more than 2,100 unique cases, and other cities like Denver have found success with this model. I would have liked to have joined Mayor Lucas last night, but I had a tall 14-year-old with me who wanted to go to the hockey game, so I had to go take him home. The second principle of our plan prioritizes healthy communities. We know that public health and public safety go hand in hand. So we budgeted for 28 additional social workers to the city's workforce, supporting services like our unhoused outreach, reentry, and victim support services. We've allocated $11.5 million so far to increase funding for violence intervention programs and youth jobs and programming. And that's just a fraction of the $135 million of the American Rescue Plan dollars coming down the pipeline for our communities, with more than $350 million still in the bank. We also joined the White House's Community Violence Intervention Initiative, which hopefully Dr. Ison will talk about. He represents us there, which connects municipalities across the state, across the country, who are using federal dollars to address crime with programs like Cure Violence. And lastly, centering on responsive governing that listens to the demands of the people, that develops real solutions to meet community needs. That's why I'm here today, to hear from people closest to the problems that we're facing. Homicides in St. Louis are down by more than a fourth from last year, and homicides are lower in 2021 than 5 out of 6 years. That's progress, but we still have much more work to do to make people feel safe in their communities. The Dutchtown neighborhood, which is proudly represented by Alderman Shane Cohn, is a fitting place to have this discussion. It's incredibly diverse, vibrant, and a dense neighborhood, but it's faced decades of intentional disinvestment and the median income is just over $17,000. It's also a neighborhood that's enrolled in the Cure Violence program, and it's a neighborhood that needs direct community investment, which is a priority of my administration. So thank you to the Neighborhood Innovation Center for hosting us. Your work and help building community and facilitate equitable development is a powerful example of how we reimagine public safety. Now I'd like to turn it over to my brother, Mayor Quinton Lucas, to say a few words.
Well, I want to say thank you to all of you for coming together and listening to me today. To start a little lighter, you may have noticed my football team has lost a lot of games lately, so I'm bringing that bad luck wherever I am, unfortunately. So they need to just send me to Hawaii or something and get out of Dodge for a minute. On the serious point, and some have asked this back in Kansas City before I came over, how did you and Mayor Jones start working on some of these issues? And first, these are issues that we, like many of our neighbors, many of our friends, have known for a lifetime. Too many of us in our families have known someone who has fallen victim to violent crime, to homicide. Too many of us have seen and known neighborhoods that for generations have had these concerns and challenges. And not often enough, in my opinion, have public servants said that there is no issue more important than making sure our communities can be safe. You know, some people said it might be a mistake. When I got elected mayor in Kansas City 2 years ago, I said I want to get homicides down to below 100 per year. Last year we were closer to 200, a record in Kansas City. And they say, do you regret saying that? I say, absolutely not. Because somebody needs to be pushing this time and time again. You can have all the nicest new stadiums in the world, all the fanciest buildings and all of that. If our young people can't grow up safely, if our neighborhoods can't be safe, then what are we? And then what are we as a community? Another thing that brought us to this moment today, and I look forward to inviting Mayor Jones to Kansas City, is that there are a lot of people in other parts of this state that like to tell us what's going on here in Dutchtown, or like to tell us what's going on in North St. Louis, or tell us what's going on in Kansas City. I don't really think that's the way you do things. As the mayor noted, those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solutions. And so I want to listen to the people of St. Louis and your ideas and your answers and your concerns about violent crime in St. Louis. I want to hear the people of Kansas City with their answers, their solutions, their concerns about violent crime in Kansas City. I respect the work of everybody in this state who does whatever they do. But you know, the way you make a difference isn't having a press conference 2 hours from St. Louis or 2 hours from Kansas City and telling us how things need to be fixed here. The way you really do things is you come here, you walk the streets, you listen, you learn, you try, you fail, but you keep trying because it is too important for us to not keep working to make sure our communities are safer. So I expect us to be real, to be honest, to recognize where we've had shortcomings and challenges over the years and where we can do better. Because you know what? I can't have victims' families calling me every week and me just say, well, I'm going to focus on something different. This issue is too important and it is too vital for all of our communities that we make sure we have a safe, a fabulous, a wonderful city of Kansas City, city of St. Louis to walk around in. And I'll make one other point. I went to college here. It feels like it was really recent, but my bald head suggests that it was a little further ago. But I went to college here and I got to know St. Louis a little bit, but not like I've gotten to with Mayor Jones, helping me go through neighborhoods, helping me see people, helping me listen to all of you. And so many of the lessons that I needed to learn then, I'm learning now about how we can build stronger, safer, better communities. And I want to make sure that for everybody back in Kansas City, that I'm taking back the principles that you have worked on. Frankly, I loved having that tour yesterday, that ride along with folks that are dealing with people in crisis and who know how to de-escalate. I have loved listening to the voices of people so that I can go back and say, you know what, we have new initiatives, new things that we're going to try, and that we're going to work with our partners, like the Department of Justice and so many others, to try to make sure we're doing better. So I will look forward to listening to you. I look forward to taking your ideas back home. Maybe I'll have a few to share as well. But more than anything, I'll look forward to next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that we can smile and we can see a safer community where Mayor Jones's son, where my son can be safe, can be proud, can be happy, and can be in their neighborhoods, whether it's in North St. Louis, East Kansas City, or anywhere in our great state, where we can all be safe each and every day. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So let's do a round of introductions. One person that's not at the table that I want to make sure I acknowledge is Mr. Sal Martinez, who is the CEO of Employment Connection in this facility. And Sal, thank you for hosting us today. We'll start with you, Dr. Isom.
I'm Dan Isom, the Public Safety Director for the City of St. Louis.
Shiraz Gorman, founder and executive director of Sibling Support Network, where I support people who have lost either a blood-related or fifth of kin sibling to violent crime.
Good morning, Joe Yancey, former CEO of Places for People Behavioral Health Organization, and for 7 years I've been working with family members who lost loved ones to gun violence.
Hello, happy to be here with you all. I'm Kateri Chapman-Kramer with Right Outside Violence, which is the St. Louis area hospital-based violence intervention program. So we work with victims of violence in our 4 level 1 trauma centers here. Capital to this program in Kansas City, and we're providing counseling and case management to prevent re-injury, retaliation, criminal involvement, and ultimately death. We're housed under the Institute for Public Health at Washington University.
Hello, I'm Brother L. I'm with the Cure Violence Program. I'm the supervisor here at the Dutchtown location, and we specialize in doing de-escalations and getting in the middle of the action while it's happening, during the later hours of the evening when most all the businesses and things are closed down. We're out here in the streets trying to create a safer neighborhood for the people that live in it and provide them resources through Employment Connection.
I am Valerie Dent. I'm with STL Mothers in Charge. I'm the president. I also lost 2 children to homicide. And when we go in, we help mothers that have lost kids to homicide and see what their needs is and how we can serve them.
I'm Alderman Shane Cohn, Alderman of the 25th Ward. One of the primary neighborhoods in my ward is Dutchtown. I've been a proud resident here for almost 20 years now. When I first ran, I ran on a platform of public safety, youth engagement, and development. One of the things that I pride myself on as alderperson is the diversity that we have in our neighborhood, and not just the diversity, but the inclusion that we have down here as well. I tout Dutchtown as a microcosm of the city of St. Louis. It's literally a reflection of the city as a whole, and probably actually a little bit more integrated than our city as a whole. So I always tell people that if we can get things right here in Dutchtown, then we have a great example of what we can do with the city as a whole. And so I'm super excited to have both the mayors here with us today, and of course all of our community partners that do so much work within the Dutchtown community. So thank you all for your time this morning.
Let's go to DOJ representative. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure. Hi, I'm Cornelia Sigworth. I'm an Associate Deputy Director at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, which is a grant-making component within the Department of Justice. And I'm thrilled to be invited to be included in this. We've worked very closely with those cities around gun violence issues over the last 5 to 6 years and probably even prior. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today, and thank you for including me.
Thank you. And I'm Wilfred Pinckney. I'm the director of the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families. I'm just serving as your facilitator today.
Sure.
So I want to thank you all for joining. And let's jump right in with our first question. What are the unique tools beyond police and gun laws being used to address gun violence in our city? And I think I'll start with Ms. Gorman.
I believe one of the areas that is most neglected is actually looking at care for the individual from a spiritual perspective. Because one of the reasons why I started Sibling Support Network is I had a breaking point. My youngest brother, John Gorman Jr., was killed August 14th of 2013. At the time, I was an ad industry executive, and I was in New York with my students when I got word that my brother had transitioned and came home on the first thing smoking. And one of the things
that was happening in the neighborhood is that everybody in the neighborhood was at the house where my brother lost his life. Basically holding vigil, holding care for one another. And thankfully, my parents allowed me to turn my brother's repast into a community healing space where BHR came out and had people ready to get folks into care and to have conversation. We had art therapists there. And one of the things that the community members kept responding to was like, thank you for listening to me. At times, we simply just need to hold space for the pain that people are experiencing and the multiple losses that they have been experiencing. Because one of the things that we have to realize is that in relationship with retaliation or the suicidality, the propensity for that, substance abuse, we fail to realize that those are coping mechanisms, right? And that is something that is a spiritual piece because there's a hole. When we lose someone, there's a hole that is left. Just not the yellow tape that's out on the street. There are people who are literally mourning a piece of them leaving. And at times we get so punitive about this notion of violence. And we also get dismissive because in language, what do we say? That was senseless. Not recognizing that behind every decision that someone makes to be violent, that was valid to them. However, when we choose to say that something is senseless, we as a community, we tap out. That is also a spiritual piece because that's just us attempting to take care of ourselves, right? We're attempting to distance ourselves from the pain that we really and truly feel, the helplessness, dare I say, that we feel. So that gets us stagnant and it really harms us. So one thing I want to put on the table is care for the individual soul, for their spirit, to acknowledge that that pain is present and to acknowledge that, yes, there is something deep within that has been broken, that has been harmed.
Kateri, you want to talk a little bit more about that, making space and
Sure. Yeah, so the thought that kind of resonated with me after you spoke was we are doing this and need to continue to address this kind of with a family systems approach, right? So we unfortunately are treating victims after they've been injured in some sense. So what we can do is prevent them from being re-injured, hurting someone else, or someone else in that family doing the same. And so I think that family systems approach is essential. And so it's not so much even the trauma of an injury, right? It's anything else that has been traumatic leading up to the situation where they're presented to, at least to us in our program. And so I think that is, to the question, kind of one of the innovative approaches is that we, that's how we're responding and intervening to prevent it on a bigger scale.
Brother Al, from the street, being out there and dealing with people, what are your thoughts?
I agree with both of you wholeheartedly, especially with what you said, Shiraz. It's a thing of empathy. You got to have a heart. We've seen so many times where whatever authority swoops in, and we get the fingers pointed. People get the shackles put on them, and then they're gone, right? But we never get to the root of why it happened. We never get to the whys, where it started at. The reason why this person did what they did, was someone hurt? Was someone else hurt? Was there a sister or a mother or a family member, and this is where we start looking at violence like a viral, pandemic, It's, we're trying to cut off transmission. And the only way for us to cut off transmission is for us to actually know where it started at. If you don't know where it started at, if you don't know where it's stemming from, how are you going to be able to respond to it? And then on the other hand, making sure that we have people in these positions that actually are from the community. That's the reason why this is vital, for me. Like, I was doing this work way before I got, involved with Cure Violence. And Cure Violence gave us the tools that we needed, that as an individual, I would never have enough resources to go out and do what I'm doing right now. Like, resources is everything. Just like the mayor said, one of the biggest things that I see dealing with, like, what people identify as petty crime in St. Louis is because lack, scarcity, people not having the things that they need. So they're going to do what any natural, the natural instinct is survival. No one wants to die. No one wants to be hungry. No one wants to be left out. We all need hugs. We just a simple thing, and I don't even, I don't promote smoking cigarettes, but just me having a pack of cigarettes and just giving that to them, and that's a way to be able to start a conversation. I'm like, hey, how you doing? How you doing out here, man? You need anything? And it's so bizarre when you see the response on these people's faces when they're shocked that I even asked them, did they need anything? Because it's no one asking. It's a whole lot of like things being passed down, legislation, this and that, but no one is asking the people what they actually need. It's a lot of homelessness that is going on in St. Louis right now, which also adds into the violence, because now we got people breaking in abandoned houses because they need a place to sleep. You got people stealing food from stores and things like that. So it all starts with lack. That's when the violence, that's where it comes from. And then as far as like the historical aspect of it, like what we identify as beef on the streets, from between two different groups or gangs or factions or whatever you want to call them, having the relationship with that person on the street, you actually being like interpersonal, with them, that can stop a whole family from getting killed, from you just knowing one person. Just the other day down the street, right here on this street, I saw a guy chasing a guy down the street with a bat, and I was off work. Chasing him down the street, and he got to beating the guy with the bat. And I walked over there. I could have got that bat. He could have swung it at me, but I said, "Hey, brother, I need you to think." And he's like, "Think," and I just pointed up. I said, "Cameras everywhere." I was like, "You're being recorded right now." And he just dropped the bat, and I was like, "Hey, come over here with me." The guy that was fighting the other guy, I brought both of them over out of the street, over onto the sidewalk, and I opened up the bag, and the guy had stole something from the other guy. So the guy that looked like the aggressor, like he was out there trying to kill this guy, actually was a guy who just got robbed. And to the naked eye, I had a lady walking down the street, and she called the cops on the guy that had the bat in his hand, but really he was protecting his home. So just having these like type of heroes, and people who have that courage in them, to go out there and really be involved in situations, and we're putting our lives on the line every day, to do this. But those people are so important because that guy turned into a volunteer 5 minutes after I had that conversation with him. So just us being present, we need 15 of us on every block. We need 15 people. It's so much going on. But the change that I've seen happen from us being out here, it is remarkable. I mean, the businesses are chiming in, the neighbors are chiming in. The guys that normally would be out there on some crazy stuff, when they see me walking down the street now, they'll even hide their drinks. Like they're like, "Oh, here come Brother L," And it's not because they're scared of me. It's because they have respect and honor for the work that we do, and they see people being helped. So it's just like they say, misery love company, happiness does too. So like we gotta get to the point where we're actually giving these people the resources most of my participants that I deal with, they breaking in cars and going into abandoned houses and committing crimes because they don't have a place to go and they don't have anyone that cares. So coming from the heart first, finding out what the root of the problem is. With me working with Mr. Martinez, we are like really just knocking off all of the excuses of why a person wouldn't want to do it. Oh, you need help with your electricity? Boom, we get it. You need food? Boom, there it is. You know, you need therapy. We got 5 different sources for them to get therapy. You know, we have all these food pantries, so we're knocking out the personal needs that will basically distract a person from moving forward because you can't have a sensible conversation with them when they're hungry. You can't, yeah.
So let's pick up on that. And Joe, go to you about the root causes and thinking about your work that you did over a long period of time. You know, what about the root causes? How does that contribute, and how do we deal with that?
So the way I thought about this for some time is that there are significant root causes in our neighborhoods and communities that have occurred over time. The disinvestment, concentrated poverty, so on and so forth. From my perspective, it is the intergenerational, individual and community trauma and toxic stress that permeates so many of our communities and neighborhoods. And when you think about that, let me give you an example. You're crossing the street. A big old semi truck is coming at you. What happens in the brain is that the adrenal medulla releases chemicals, norepinephrine, norepinephrine. Boom, I get hypervigilant, I'm like, I gotta do something, boom, I'm out of there. I get across the street, the truck is missing. There are too many people in our neighborhoods and communities where that semi-trailer truck is coming at them 24/7 a day. And if we think about violence, in particular gun violence, there are, I think, 3 factors that, from a behavioral perspective, behavioral health perspective, that come into play. Many of our situations are younger people. And so one is nothing we can do about it. The prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is the part of the brain that does executive function, in other words, you think through your action, doesn't develop until the age of 25. 2, we've got this constant, for too many of our community members, this constant drip of that adrenal medulla and that endorphin and norepinephrine. So that hypervigilance is just so much a part of life. There's a threat everywhere. A threat to my gut, my money, a threat to my gal, a threat to my this, a threat to my that, a threat to this, whatever. That's something we can do about it. And the third is something, unfortunately, right now we can't do about, that Mayor Jones talked about, and that is the proliferation of firearms in our community. It is very easy, as we all know, to get a firearm. You put those things together, and you've got that impulsiveness. Somebody does me wrong. I see you as a threat. Bam! I'm not thinking about all that's going to happen afterwards. It's easy. I got this firearm. Bam! I took care of it. So I think that we've really got to focus on those, what we call them, root causes. And to me, those are the things where people get what they need, as you said, Brother L, that we are addressing and talking about this trauma and messaging in a way that it is not your fault. It's not what's wrong with you. Let's talk about what's happened to you. And now let's get together, because this is not the way we want our community to be. The way I want our community to live. And I think the last thing I'll just say is that investing in building capacity of and empowering the people that live in our neighborhoods and communities to be part of the solution and not just that they are passive recipients of whatever somebody else is going to do. inside out versus outside in. So that's my thought.
So Ms. Dent, I mean, you lost 2
Yes.
children, so what do you think about this?
Well, in my situation, when we speak with other mothers, I explain to them that I have lost 2 sons to homicide, and you can make it. But I also stress, we don't want this to be an ongoing circle, and I know as mothers, we have a very strong voice in our families. And retaliation, you know how you feel. Do you want another mother that feels the way that you're feeling right now? So what is it that you can do to stop the retaliation going on in your family? We also go in and see what is it that this mother needs, how can we support her? Because most of the time, mothers, they're not only just the mother of this child that they're lost, but they're the grandmothers, and they have their grandchildren, and everyone living with them. So therefore, you have to stress to them, this isn't the way that it should be, and we know how we come to this world, but we don't know how we're leaving. But we need to deal with this problem. And do you really, really want another mother to feel this way? And then they look at me, and I guess, you think about the loss that you have. And do you really want, this to continue to go on? In my family, when it happened, everybody was like war because my children were two minutes from home. But I had to let them know that God has us all under control. He doesn't need our help, we need his help. You still had the ones that wants to go out and let's get the revenge, but I was not allowing it. And I know as a mother, I have a very strong voice in my family. And I have 3 other boys, and they've lost their younger brothers, so they're feeling, some kind of way. They want revenge. But we were blessed. I did not have that. So you just really have to go in with the families and see what their needs is and how you can help them get through the situation.
Thank you. So I want to go to Ms. Sigworth. We start thinking about how do we treat this as a public health crisis now, right? We talk about that a lot. What does that mean to DOJ?
Yeah, thank you for that. And we do have a lot of resources for communities. We're thinking about this question ourselves and how we develop these community violence intervention tools. It was really wonderful and fascinating to hear the responses to your questions from the rest of the panel. And we've worked with Mothers in Charge before through our public safety partnership work. So supporting organizations like that and the efforts that they have in communities is very important to us. We have our Burn Criminal Justice Innovations Program that does provide grant funding and support to community organizations to work in partnership around violent crime issues. And we're hoping to have a larger community violence interventions grant program next year. If that's passed in the budget. And then the other, grant programs that we have, I wanted to make sure I mentioned, our justice and mental health portfolio. We have quite a large behavioral health portfolio. It includes a new grant program this year called Connect and Protect, which helps build law enforcement, public health, behavioral health responses in communities. And so I heard it sounded like both mayors have different responses now, and we can help build this out. There are tons and tons of tools and assistance available as cities work on those responses. We just had a big national conference called Taking the Call around building those different responses out. And then we also have a very large COSAP grant program, which is really focused on responses to the opioid crisis. So there are resources available in that program for both law enforcement in cities and communities to address some of those behavioral health concerns as well.
Thank you. And we do have a Justice Mental Health Collaboration grant here in the city of St. Louis, so we have taken advantage of it and are appreciative of that. I want to go to Dr. Isom, thinking about this treating gun violence as a public health approach. He's doing great work in the Department of Public Safety under the mayor's leadership to rethink public safety. So what do you want to add here?
Well, this is my 34th year in government and law enforcement. And really, we've had sort of a singular focus on law enforcement for many of those years to address this issue of gun violence. As everybody has indicated, we know that this is really a health crisis, not a criminal justice crisis. And so we are really in the beginning stages of a paradigm shift. I mean, we are in the infancy of this new approach to how we deal with violence in our communities. It's a more thoughtful, it's a more humane approach, it's a more comprehensive approach that we are looking at. And I think one of the things we must understand, and one of the reasons why Mayor Lucas is here, is that we're not in this effort by ourselves. We need to learn from other cities. We need to learn from people who are in the communities, on the streets, who are doing the work. And that's one of the ideas behind the White House Community Violence Intervention Collaborative, is that there are cities out there like Detroit, Baltimore, where the hospital-based intervention program began, the first one. Chicago, who is a part of that collaborative, has Ready Chicago, which is another form of cure violence. We are not in this effort alone, and we're at the beginning stages of how you figure out how we transform our approach from a community-based comprehensive approach away from a law enforcement criminal justice centered approach. And so we are working very hard under the leadership of Mayor Jones to move that paradigm shift quickly as possible, because we know that ultimately this is really how we cure violence. It's transforming people's lives, transforming communities, providing those resources for folks, and really thinking about the conditions in which people live in and how those are driving the violence in the community. And certainly we have a law enforcement component, but that's not the first solution for solving the problem. So I think that's the direction we're moving in here.
And I want to go to the alderman, thinking about this whole idea of gun violence as a public health approach. What does that mean from your lens?
Yeah, this is something that, I've given a considerable amount of time, energy, effort, and thought to over the years. We live with it daily, in Dutchtown, and it's something that, my neighbors and I, every time we leave the house, it's something that's on our minds. And so one of the, first things that I started working on was actually a youth intervention program in partnership with the police department to try and, interrupt the violence. And then of course, as we've moved, onward, supporting cure violence and, other programs like that, we actually also have the Dutchtown Opportunity Coalition for Youth that is a recent organization that we formed to help young people get more tools and resources and access to those tools and resources so that they can better themselves and hopefully prevent them from becoming, not to be cliche, but kind of part of the problem, and help them get on a productive path in life and be able to live their lives the way that they're intended and supposed to be able to live their lives and be contributing members to our neighborhood, and just as they probably want to be. We just need to be able to give them that little help to be able to get them there. And so, I've loved hearing about the, work that everyone's doing, and, certainly the vision that the administration has for moving things forward, and certainly, continuing that effort as we move to get people more resources and tools to be able to help, members in communities like Dutchtown.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge around these issues is always time, and we obviously don't have an infinite amount of time, but we could talk about this all day. I'm sure everyone at the table is passionate. I think one thing that really stands out to me is the word collaboration, coordination. I mean, it's about doing this together, right?
That's
right.
right.
Everybody's mentioned that in some form. I know people often ask, are you doing enough? Well, as long as you're doing it collaboratively, you don't run the risk of not doing enough.
Right.
And so we all need to continue that, and I know everyone at this table works together and looking for partnerships to help support and uplift their work, mostly focused on people, right? Because sometimes we lose the focus of the people who we're trying to help, and that's where we really need to keep it. But I appreciate all that was said and all that you all do. I think it's great to have the DOJ here, because I think to help inform them about how they need to structure funding so that we can get the proper funding out to support and uplift all the work that communities are doing is important. So I want to thank you all for joining. I'm going to turn it over to the mayor, see if she has any last words.
Yes, I also want to thank you for joining us today for this conversation, especially as we are hosting my brother from the west side of the state. But I think that, you know, the conversation that we had it just underscores the urgency of the need, as well as it underscores that, you know, it's going to take all of us. The burden of curing gun violence should not fall solely on our government or our police officers. It's going to take all of us working together and making sure that we are addressing it from the root cause. I mean, we've talked about it for years and years and years, and I am just so humbled and blessed that I get to lead the city at a time where the conversation is finally changing, and that we can actually move the needle on addressing it at the root cause, and have partners in the federal government like the DOJ, like the Biden-Harris administration, through grants and money through ARPA, and really being intentional about addressing it at the root cause, and involving community in those decisions. So I thank all of you for joining us today, and look forward to continuing in partnership in this work. Thank you. God bless.
I heard a commitment to changing the epidemic of violence that we have in St. Louis, that we have in Kansas City. I felt that it was a full community investment. And that doesn't mean that we have to fight ways we've done it in the past, that we need to just enhance how we've done it. So I think in too much of Missouri, the conversation's really just been a law enforcement conversation. I think what you heard from the folks inside today was that this needs to be something where we're bringing in the community, we're bringing in our churches, we're bringing in so many folks outside of government. And that's what I heard today. And so the challenge is similar in Kansas City. The solutions are a little bit different, but I think the most important part is that we actually work together, if it's cross-state, cross-country, cross-neighborhoods, cross-disciplines, to make sure that we're seeing a difference here.
Anything, we're hard on ourselves sometimes in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Anything you've seen here you'd like to take
Yeah,
back?
yeah.
Anything specific that you'd like to replicate?
You know, and I will say you're hard on yourselves over here. I see a lot of things that are positives. The reduction that you've had in violent crime from last year to this one is something that I think should be the envy of many cities. We're experiencing a reduction in Kansas City as well, but the sustained changes that we're seeing over the years shows a commitment to making a difference and a realization that we can and we need to make a difference. If there's something that I saw in St. Louis last night, it was seeing social workers, health professionals who are out there de-escalating and dealing with situations in our community, helping relieve some of our police officers and others. And I think that's something that every community in our state needs to explore. It's something that we need to have real investment in, and it's something that the people of St. Louis and Mayor Jones should be proud of.
Mayor Lucas, can you describe what on that ride-along that you did last night? Can you describe what the ride-along was and what you saw when you were on it?
You know, I think what I can first describe is the power of hearing the stories from the young woman who is a social worker, a behavioral health professional in the program. And the first thing she said is, we work with the police, we work with the community. This isn't about political battles. This is about making things more positive for the people of St. Louis. That's something that was refreshing for me to hear. In Kansas City, we have a lot of the debates that you're familiar with over here. And it's about money, and it's about who's doing what. It isn't about threshold problems. How do we make sure everybody's safer? So that was the most powerful thing. The second thing I saw on an individual situation was, and I've done ride-alongs in Baltimore, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., my hometown, so many others. But what I saw last night was something different. There was a gentleman who was in a state of distress, and the way that situation ended wasn't in handcuffs, wasn't in a physical fight, wasn't in a shooting, wasn't in all of that you see. It was in people walking away. It was in something that will have follow-up in the days and weeks ahead. That's what makes a difference. And something that I would say to the people, not just in the city of St. Louis, but in the suburbs, in the country, in Kansas City, everywhere. We have to change our mentality, right? We grew up in knowing a certain way of things. It isn't just incarceration that makes a difference. It isn't just answering calls the same way we did in the 80s or 90s that makes a difference. And I'm somebody who's a lawyer, so I'm used to the system the way it is. It's doing this. It's making sure that you have your behavioral health professionals. It's making sure you're investing in people. That's what I saw in St. Louis last night. And frankly, it was refreshing. And it's something that I want to go back and fund and build up in Kansas City, because largely our officers, our neighborhoods, so many people ask for that each and every day.
Kansas City has less homicides than St. Louis. What are some things that you want to apply here to St. Louis?
Well, I haven't yet had a chance to visit Kansas City and to see what works in Kansas City. That this is the first part of that partnership, right? Quinton's visiting us today. We're going to plan a visit for me to visit to go to Kansas City and possibly go to a football game, and hopefully I don't bring them the bad luck that he brought us last night. But you know, that's what this is about. When you have friends who are mayors in other cities. I had visited Denver as well, and that's where we also saw this cops and clinicians plan and work without officers. Actually, they started as cops and clinicians, but now they have a total non-officer response, and hopefully we'll be able to get to that point. But that's also the fun about being a mayor, is learning what works in other cities and how we can bring those lessons here and apply them here, because we don't have time to reinvent the wheel. That's People are dying every day. So how can we see what works across the country and bring that here? We also learned about Tampa. Is a bigger city than both of ours and only has double-digit homicides. So we have been in contact with the mayor of Tampa to see what works there and how can we bring that here. And one of the things that mayor said, Mayor Jane Castor, was that they have an intentional investment in their young people to make sure that they have safe and fun activities and productive activities to take them and turn them away from a life of crime.
Structurally, Mayor, you tried to take some money and divert it from the police budget. We've also seen Mayor Jones take money from the police budget into other things. Is this just all part of the cultural change that has to go on, that people have to realize we're not going to fully give as much money to law enforcement as we have in the past?
You know, I reject the premise in some way, and I can't speak for Mayor Jones, but having visited with her in the past, this is not about taking anything from anyone. It is about building up programs that help support our communities, help support our police officers. Our police officers, and in all of these ride-alongs, that's why I do them. That's why she visited Denver. That's why I've been to Baltimore and Los Angeles and DC, where I'm talking to officers who want safe neighborhoods, who want kids who are involved in activities, who want support with behavioral health in our communities. And so to me, the change isn't actually just taking anything away. It's saying, how do we build as many programs as possible to help address the real challenges we have? And when you have behavioral health challenges in the community, you need to invest in behavioral health. When you have challenges with youth activities and youth employment, you need to invest in the youth. And when you have a need, right, for law enforcement responses, then you invest in your police. They're our biggest line item in Kansas City. I imagine it's the same in St. Louis. And that's not going to change. And I tell everybody who sometimes complains about me on the other side, we're going to continue to have police officers that are doing important responses in our community. But we're also going to value our behavioral health experts, our schools, our youth activities, our community centers, and more. So it's not a diversion. Instead, I think it's an enhancement on how we're doing things, because importantly, I'll let them pass real quick, y'all public works is on point, by the way. I've seen more work trucks. They put me to shame in St. Louis. But I will say importantly this, what the change you are seeing, I think in this mayor, and I think respectfully in Mayor Jones, is we are not going to be mayors and have the same pain and the same challenges that we saw growing up in the 80s and the 90s continue forever. I am dedicated and committed to 10 years from now, 15 years from now in Kansas City, people can say, wow, they pulled off what Tampa did, right? They have double-digit homicides. It breaks my heart, and I go to too many bigger cities where they have fewer homicides than we do, both of our cities. I want to be able to say we got down to some smaller number because we actually looked at how we could holistically address the challenges at issue.
Got to ask you, any comment on the recall effort?
Of me? I mean, they tried to recall me 5 times, my brother. You know what? I'm still standing. I expect I'll be mayor for a while longer in Kansas City. And, you know, a lot of people have a lot of different anger these days in all types of different ways. Something we deal with. But I'll tell you this much. We stand strong. We keep pushing against everything that comes against us. And more than anything, we will show, I think, Jefferson City and everybody else in Missouri. This is what collaboration looks like. Collaboration isn't knocking the major cities in Missouri on Twitter. Collaboration isn't passing a bunch of laws without talking to the people of St. Louis or Kansas City while you claim they're trying to protect them. Collaboration is going to our neighborhoods and making a real difference. And that's what I'm proud of, and that's why I'm proud to be with this mayor today.
We got time for one more. This is a little specific, but it applies, I think. In the Place neighborhood, it sounds like last night with 2 people shot. It started as an argument. A gun was, interjected into that situation. What did you hear today that hopefully that won't happen as frequently in the future? And if you do know about last night, anything you want to say about that?
Anytime that we have gun violence in our community, I am very shocked and feel sorry for the victims that are involved. But what I did hear today from Brother L in Cure Violence is that, oh, isn't that wonderful? What I did hear today from Brother L in Cure Violence is that when our interrupters are in community, when they are present in community, that there is always a possibility for them to de-escalate. And so knowing that they have been in community and in spaces where it's about to happen, where they're able to interrupt, is a model that needs to be replicated. And so we've put $5 million from ARPA funds into community violence intervention initiatives like Cure Violence, like Focus Deterrence, because we want to cure the cycle of violence, but it's gonna take all of us working together to do that. So it's not just Cure Violence, it's not just our officers, that it doesn't fall on the burden shouldn't fall on the shoulders of government and police officers. It's gonna take all of us.
I can't ignore the gunshots. You feel safe standing here right now?
Well, I hear gunshots in my neighborhood every night. My son and I fall asleep to the lullaby of gunshots in the distance every night because I'm the first mayor in over 20 years to be born, raised, and still live in North St. Louis. So we live in a neighborhood that, we hear it more often than not. And it's unfortunate, yes, I heard it, but I didn't flinch because, it's a part of my life now. And that shouldn't be. We should not have Stockholm syndrome when we hear gunshots in the distance. We should be angry, and we are angry, but it's an unfortunate daily occurrence in our community, and so that's what this conversation was about today. And then we also talk about the proliferation of weapons and how the state of Missouri has made it nearly impossible for mayors like us to pass common sense gun safety, registering your weapon, or making sure that that you lock it up and don't leave it in your car. Common sense things. Because if everybody's gonna have access to a gun, just like people have access to a car, you should be able to register. You should have to register that.
Is there anything on, gun control? Is there anything that you found that this is something you can do, or any plans you have going forward, or?
No, the state legislature has preempted the cities and municipalities from enacting any gun laws that are more restrictive than the state. And then with the Second Amendment Preservation Act, they've gone even further by tying the hands of our law enforcement to even intervene. So they want us to solve gun violence, but then they tie our hands to do it. We can't fight gun violence with our hands tied behind our backs.
And they are giving us solutions exclusively from the 1980s and 1990s, when we have seen we have to be more creative. And let me just say this is the same sound I hear in Kansas City. And I grew up sleeping on the floor. You grow up knowing this is part of your daily life.
Right.
The reason we are here is so that we have change in our neighborhoods. Too many people hear these sounds regularly. We're committed to making a difference in them.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Sal,